Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Coaching Call podcast. On this podcast, we'll cover various types of coaching by trainers in sports, martial arts, fitness, and business. We'll discuss each coach's methods to getting the most out of their respective athletes or clients and how they attempt to change the platform in which they coach. Join us on a fun adventure as we discuss unique coaching styles. Coaching is a universal part of how we get others to get something done. Join your host, Rafael, and his guests on this unique journey in coaching.
Hi, I'm Sifu Rafael, and this is the Coaching Call podcast. If you enjoy this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. This episode was made possible by listeners like you. Dr. Fred, good morning. Thank you so much for joining me. I know it's super early for you, being that you're in California.
Not too bad. I've been up a little while already, and it's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for the honor and privilege.
Absolutely. So thank you. One of the things that is always very intriguing to me, and because of your profession, you may even agree with it, is it's our childhood, right? It kind of reflects on who we become along the way, all the episodes of our life, if you will, right? The moments that have made us who we are. I'd love to know where you grew up and who influenced you even before the age of 10.
Well, great question. Thank you. So I grew up in the Detroit, Michigan area. We grew up in Northwest Detroit, and I was born to a family in some form of chaos and disarray, as I understand. So I had two brothers older than me, 10 or 14 years older than me. And they were there with my parents. And as far as I can tell, there was a fair amount of conflict going on in the home. And it's what they told me was going on. It's not like I have any actual recall of it. And I was born to the family to actually bring joy and love and healing to that family. So I would say that I've been a healer ever since I arrived. And I really mean that, like kind of hitting the time clock upon arrival. From what I understand, my brothers have told me that I did a really good job of doing that for the first couple of years anyways. I think they both agree it hasn't been consistent for 66 years, but I've done fairly well at bringing the healing notion into the family.
Nice.
I was called on to be, a light, a bundle of joy for the family. And I was often called to bring pleasure and smiles to a situation that maybe wasn't so pleasurable or funny. So I was a precocious child. You can imagine I had these two brothers eager to teach me everything. I knew a little bit about a lot of things that most of my peers didn't know anything about. Even as I arrived in kindergarten, I knew how to read, I knew how to write, I knew how to do simple math, and none of my peers could actually do that. But the thing I was most enchanted with was this idea of communication. I do remember vividly actually standing in my playpen and watching my family communicate with each other, standing in there in the living room, talking to each other, and seemingly with a lot of emotions, trying to get things done or get things across to each other. And I wanted to someday be, a communicator. So they taught me how to communicate. I was pretty articulate early on as well. And in elementary school, that's what I did. I just talked a lot. And there's no elementary school teacher who didn't know who would have forgotten having Fred as a student. So I was really advanced and I knew how to talk. I hadn't yet really taken into consideration the very deep value of listening that we now know is so critical in the form of communication. But talking was no problem for me. And I wanted to learn how to communicate, how to make exchanges, how to get things done. And of course, I thought this was going to be taught in school, but it was not taught in school. In school, I was thought of as a disruptor more than somebody who could find discourse. Like it was like when I tried to communicate or tried to listen or tried to exchange ideas, I would just be told to be quiet, sit down and do what the teacher says. And, just like all of us, that's how conventional education goes. And the more that I could mimic and just regurgitate whatever the teacher said, the better student I would be called. And then I would be moved forward in the system. So communication was not taught in elementary school. I figured, well, these people learned it somewhere. Maybe it's junior high. So I went to and it got even a little bit worse. And then it was like, high school. And it even got even worse in high school. Now, by that time, I was learning how to communicate, but it was when I was outside of school. So I did a fair amount of skipping of classes. I was outside in the community. I was riding my bike. I was hitchhiking. I was getting around, just learning how different people lived. and just exploring, what does it mean to be a communicator, to be a human being? What does it mean to connect to other human beings? I eventually went to college with the idea that this particular college was going to teach me how to communicate, because I knew that there was protests there, and there was, people power. There was things going on. It was at the University of Michigan, and it's only 40 minutes away. So off I went, hoping to be a communicator in Ann Arbor. But again, although I did learn quite a bit in the streets of Ann Arbor, it wasn't at the University of Michigan. And I eventually left after a year and a half. I dropped out and I got on a bus, and I took a Greyhound across the country to Berkeley. And because I had heard that was a place I could learn how to communicate. So it was, I'm going to find out what my life is about through communication. And frankly, that summer in Berkeley was fantastic. It just was an unsustainable lifestyle. But I did find out a lot about myself that summer, and was eventually encouraged by my family to return to school. There was this new industry that was just bubbling up, and it was really important. And they thought I had the prowess and the expertise and the aptitude to take on this industry. You may have heard of the industry. It was called computers. And it was like, oh yeah, I could probably do that. And so all the way back to Michigan I went. That was the only computer in Michigan, was at the University of Michigan. It was a 2-acre facility that we just sat in all night long doing punch cards and batch jobs. And I don't know, that didn't seem like that was me either. So I only lasted a short time, and I had dropped out again. And came home and pledged to my family that there'd be no way in the world I would ever return to school, because that wasn't where the action was.
Right.
And my mom said, that's okay. You don't have to go to school for it, but you have to get a job. I was like, oh, Mom, so she got me an application for a civil service job at down the road in Pontiac, Michigan, where I could be a child care worker for adolescent boys at a state mental health facility. So that's what I did. I eventually got that job, expecting to stay just 3 weeks. You see, orientation was 3 weeks, and I thought I could be paid 40 hours times $13, 3 weeks in a row, get enough money, buy myself a car, drive around the country, and then figure out what my life was about. But on the 4th week, I was somehow encouraged to go to the floors by my friend Paul. And so we went to Meadowview together and met these kids. And I was entranced. It was like, wow, I can actually communicate here. I can be called on to communicate here, and I can get paid. If the better communicator I am, the more fun I can have at work, and I can get paid for it. Like,
that works.
Yeah. So I began to do that. I began to be a childcare worker, and over time I got pretty good at it. And over the next 5 years, I stayed at the same facility over there in Pontiac, and eventually realized I didn't want to retire as a childcare worker. And I really hated the direction that psychiatry was going in. Prozac had not yet been introduced, but soon was to be introduced. And the whole idea now was just, chemical and physical restraints is what the psychiatrist at the facility was about. We would call him if Jimmy and Johnny got in a fight or Tony was up too late, and he'd come down and interview the child for a few seconds and interview us for a few more seconds. Then he'd go in a nursing station, write some order, and then we'd have to go retrieve the child and hold him down and pull down his sweatpants a bit and give him an injection of some, stuporous producing cocktail. And if in fact he stayed in a stupor for the next 24 hours, we would call that, a success story. Now, what's interesting about that is that's still going on every single day in most hospitals around this country. It's not like that we've graduated from that. We don't really take that into consideration. We think we're sending people to the hospital because it's a safe place, but frankly, more often than not, it's the last thing from safe. But I couldn't stand that. That was barbaric. It was unacceptable. It was not something that I could actually tolerate. So I thought I would go back into school. My brother was already a psychiatrist, finish my degree, and become a psychiatrist so that I could bring communication into the field. And, frankly, with a fair amount of attention, and good luck and fortune and blessings, there I was completing my schooling in Wayne State University while I was still at this job, and then applying to medical school and getting into a great medical school in downtown Chicago, Northwestern University. And I went to medical school with the full intention of getting out as a psychiatrist and getting through those 4 years, and then, becoming a psychiatrist, taking my residency, and then, of course, my fellowship in child and adolescent psychiatry. and boom, I'm expelled. I'm out there. It's I'm typecast. And in
Mm.
the typecast, as you can imagine, psychiatry was just beginning to get the identity it has now. For instance, if I ask you what is a psychiatrist and what's the difference between a psychiatrist and a psychologist, if you're like 99.9% of the people who answer that question, you'll say they're the ones who medicate. And it's like, well, I didn't like medicating at all. I didn't feel like that was curative or healing in any way. I was really against it in most every situation. And I definitely didn't like diagnosing people because I just had it that all people was their own experience. And I didn't want to give them an alphabet soup diagnosis. And there I
Yeah.
was now being called on to diagnose and medicate.
Mm.
So for the first several years of my life, I was in a fair amount of, discordance. There was a fair amount of duplicity. There was a fair amount of heartache and soul sacrifice every time I diagnosed somebody or I medicated someone. And over my career, I have medicated at least 100,000 prescriptions, and I've seen at
Wow.
least 30 to 40,000 patients who have called me, their doctor at least for 1 second. And early on, all that really meant was diagnosing people or confirming diagnoses and then medicating people with medicines that I did not feel were optimal or really could work. And in most cases, I learned that they were doing the opposite. Now, I took an oath, and the oath. It's a Hippocratic oath, and it's part of the very famous part of that oath is, you raise your hand, you say, first do no harm. And I wasn't sure that I was living up to that oath. So I really wasn't sure at all. When I was writing those prescriptions, I wasn't sure that many of the times I wasn't actually hurting my clients. So in 2006, I decided I had had enough of that, and I began doing something that thought to be fairly radical at the time. Although when you think about it, it's not very radical. And that was I decided to take people off of medicine. And it was like, I can do that. If I can put them on, I can take them off. And I took my low risk patients off of medicine, and reliably and predictably and nearly uniformly and unanimously, each and every one of them got better, way better, and frequently lost their diagnosis entirely in the process. Now, this was an extraordinary finding, right? I mean, it was like, but not one I didn't expect, just extraordinary in its own right. It just flies against the industry standard or what we're thought the industry does.
Let me interrupt you for a minute because you've given us so much food for thought and give you a chance to get a drink. One of the things that you said early on that you were hitchhiking.
Yeah, I like
And
hitchhiking a lot.
how old were you when you were hitchhiking? Because that, especially nowadays, can pose such a danger for
There
a
was
young
no
person.
danger at the time. There was no danger.
Yes.
I'd never suspected any danger, and I got in with some shady people every so often. But I just put my thumb out after junior high. So I was in 7th and 8th grade is when I
Wow.
really started doing it, and I would just go wherever they took me to. I would just put I'd be on 11-mile road, and I'd just put it down. I want to go east, and if they took me all the way, to Mount Clemens, which was quite a ways down the road, I would go there. It was fine. Or I would get on Southfield Road or Evergreen Road and just put my thumb, decide which direction I wanted to go in, maybe pick a general location or a
Right.
possible, a possible destination. But frequently I would just go just to be in the car with somebody, have conversations with somebody, and then be left off and find out what's going on in that part of the community. It wasn't, I get
Incredible.
that that's out of range of what the present world would have our general eighth graders do. But it is what I did to learn about people.
Yeah, it's incredible when we can think about the way life has changed from it being okay to now it's super dangerous. I had a guest of mine. He was on, and he actually picked up someone, and they were on. And Nikki says that was brave of you, Dr. Fred, to make a decision to follow your gut to those people.
Thanks,
And
Nikki.
when we can consider this gentleman, he picked somebody up, and the guy stayed with him like 3-4 days, and it was like on the third or fourth day, he was just traveling across the country. The guy shot him 4 times
Mm-hmm.
in the head. Somehow my friend lived,
Mm-hmm.
and incredible. But and this wasn't now. This was many years ago. So
Mm-hmm.
probably maybe even around the time that you were hitchhiking, and he was an adult. He's the one that picked up the hitchhiker,
Mm-hmm.
right? And when we we talk about it, and you kind of like really spoke about it really quick. But that's something that it takes a lot of or a lot of I don't care what happens to me. Right? There's so much that can be thought of when somebody says, "Yeah, I hitchhike all the time," or they didn't think anything of it, or and you said that you grew up in a household that was a little bit troublesome, so that can also lead to why you did it. And then the other thing that you mentioned is that communication is something that you learned early on, yet no matter how hard you looked, you could not find it.
Hmm.
And to me, that is really powerful because when we think about communication, and you are 1,000% correct, we expect it to be taught in school,
Hmm.
yet it's not.
Hmm.
And you looked at every school you went to, yet you still couldn't find it. I'd love to share a video with you on one of the things that we're doing here in New York. Take a look.
In a world where words shape destinies and connections forge futures, this November 22nd to the 24th, Speaking Prowess brings you the ultimate hands-on workshop. We have a lineup of some of the most influential communication experts in the industry. These are the voices that will guide you on a journey to enhance your ability to connect, influence, and succeed. Sifu Rafael, master instructor and founder of Speaking Prowess, blends communication and leadership to help you reach your full potential. Richard Walsh brings his strategic and tactical expertise to deliver rapid, lasting results for your business. Dr. Oliver T. Reed, the international multi-best-selling author and motivational speaker, known as the Writing Coach, will help you craft your messages with precision. Jose Escobar, a nationally recognized speaker and leader, will guide you in mastering personal development and leadership skills. This is more than just an event. It's a game-changing, skill-building experience. Walk away with communication prowess that transforms your personal and professional life. Speaking Prowess, where communication becomes your superpower. Reserve your seat now.
One of the things that you spoke about was not only communication, but connecting. You were connecting with people. And I think the best way to say that we can do that is through communication, right?
For sure. Yeah. We don't know. We don't have very many better ways to do it. And when we say communication, we're normally, diluting that down. We're normally, distilling that down to the vocality that we're doing here, the talking and listening. But there's actually many other ways to communicate as well, and we know those. The performing and the visual arts are spectacular ways to communicate. For instance, art, music, dancing, singing, drama, cooking, writing, gardening. Some of these things are really just terrific ways to get our point across. And sometimes, more often than not, we are really restricted by the linearity of language and the fact that we have to put words together, like beads on a string in order to get our ideas across, while we attempt to explain or at least describe what's happening in our life, which is multi-dimensional and multi-divergent. And then we take that and distill it down to words and then put it into a sentence without, just spontaneously hoping and praying and wishing that we're saying the things that we want to say about what our experience is so that the other person can hear it. And, communication like that is very limited in how we can really step into shared experiences. And shared experiences is what we're really talking about, and those certainly happen through the world of communication and connection.
Is one of the things, and I love what you decided to do, is to take people off medication.
Mhm.
And also, when you realize that the words or the commitment that you made, it says, I shall do no harm. Meanwhile, you did not feel comfortable with the prescriptions you were doing. And it was because that was, I guess, the teachings that go on, right? This is what you need to do. this A happens, you need to do B, right? But there's always a better way. And you found, I believe, the better way where, and I love the fact that you said they got better and are no longer diagnosed with that illness.
Right.
How did that make you feel overall?
There was a lot of challenge, believe it or not, at the time because the industry is not geared to hear me. And so at the time, I was really wanted to get violent about it. I wanted to take people by their collars and throw them up against the wall and tell them to stop doing what they're doing. And they had no right to continue to hurt people or hurt the children of these people. And that, it wasn't really medications. Most people focus on that I took people off medicine, but really what I did is I took people off their diagnosis and I took them off of the assumption there was something wrong with them. Now, this is a much more powerful thing to do than to take people off of medicine. Taking people off of medicine when they're fairly certain or confirmed that there's something wrong with them only has the counteraction of people asking, what am I going to do then with my problem? What else can I take if I don't take medicine or something like that? And, over the next few years, after I got through that little violent stage where I wanted to scream from the mountaintops, I began to look at what is the entryway into this cycle that I can make a difference. And the entryway into the cycle has nothing to do with medicine. It has nothing to do with the diagnosis. It had nothing to do with the industry. It has nothing to do with big pharma, insurance companies, hospitals, doctors. It doesn't have to do with that. The big problem here is that people really want to know, they want to be confirmed that there's something wrong with them. And if we can get people to see that there's nothing wrong with them, you see that the whole cascade gets interrupted in that sense. As soon as someone realizes that it's okay to be uncomfortable, or as Krishnamurti said, that it's no sign of mental health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society, we start getting a real understanding that the whole cascade, the first domino, is this idea that people believe there's something inherently wrong with them. Now, what's really cool about that is that all of us believe that about ourselves. So it couldn't be a more, let's say, a more quintessential symptom to have of normalcy, than to think that there's something wrong with you. Why is that? Because we compare our insides to everybody's outsides, and we're pretty sure that they're getting along better in the areas of life that we're having trouble with. So there must be something wrong with us. In fact, not realizing that each and every one of us has that experience. 100% of all people, including monks in Tibet, have that experience. Everyone has that experience.
Right.
So it's very interesting. People, we're the only subspecialty, I learned over time. I'm pretty sure this is true. The only subspecialty in all of the healing arts and all of medicine, that if you come in and I tell you that I think that you're fine, you get pissed.
Yeah.
Like, that's wild. People think that they come to a psychiatrist to get answers, but they really don't come to a psychiatrist to get answers. They come to a psychiatrist to get confirmation that there's something wrong with them. If I tell them that I think they're just okay, they're actually just living a human life and you should keep doing it and understand that, and life is difficult and there's things that are scary and things that are depressing and things that are anxiety producing and awkward. And there's things that, it's difficult to stay on task and it's difficult to be in social situations and difficult to be in a relationship. And all those things are really challenging for all humans of all types everywhere. Some people get really angry. They wanted a diagnosis.
Yeah.
And they're like, dude, if I wanted that, I wouldn't have come to a psychiatrist. I would have come to a philosopher or something. It's like, well,
Right.
and then they go next door and they get their alphabet soup diagnosis and they get the medications, they get their diagnosis. And what we haven't talked about yet that's really important that I learned, I think, over time, over my 35 plus years in the field, 45 years, including the childcare, is that people, is that these medicines and these diagnoses almost always perpetuate or induce or increase the symptoms they're marketed to treat. So that it is true when you start taking on your diagnosis. If I call you, you come into my office, you tell me you have dry skin, you love peanuts, you drink too much water, you have a big nose, and you're trouble in a crystal shop, a crystal factory, a crystal shop. I would say, I look it up and I'd say, oh, Sifu, you're an elephant. Now you would walk away knowing and confirm that you are an elephant. You would be the same elephant that you thought an elephant was before you got there. You would take on the identity of elephant. maybe if you had big ears and a good memory, you'd actually think you were elephant type 2.
Mm.
And if you had all that going on, you'd start looking for the chains and the circuses in the world.
Yeah.
Because you're an elephant, and you take on that diagnosis upon getting it and agreeing that you have it.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone else calls you an elephant too, except for the people that don't believe that you're an elephant. And then you tell them, and they tell you, dude, you're not an elephant. You're just a human. And you say, you don't get it. I saw a specialist. He told me I'm an elephant. And in fact, you should get tested to be an elephant too, because I see that you have dry skin and your big nose as well.
Yeah.
And that's how psychiatric diagnoses go on. Now, the part that I mentioned, I think you'll find interesting, is when I really found, like, you really are giving someone an honest to goodness chemical imbalance when you give them a drug. It didn't have a chemical imbalance before you had them.
You only added to it. Yeah.
But we created it.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't just add to a previously conceived chemical imbalance. Maybe there wasn't one. But the whole idea of taking these chemicals is the notion that we're giving a chemical to counterbalance whatever so-called chemical imbalance or biological psychiatric diagnosis you have. And in fact, these medicines, by definition, by design, frequently actually induce, increase, perpetuate, or cause the symptoms they're marketed to deal with, which then has you asking the psychiatrist to do the only things that we were taught, which are to increase, add, or change the medicine. You don't hear reduction or eliminate in what we do, because it isn't what we do. We don't do that. Well, sometimes we reduce. If the side effects appear to be too large, we might lower the dose a little. But as far as getting you off of medicine once you're on, that is not in the actual contract. That's in the implicit contract. You come on, you get on medicine, we decide, let's see if this works. What you don't realize is if it doesn't work, we're going to try something else.
Right.
We're not going to back off and think that the medicines are actually a razor blade embedded in a Band-Aid. These medicines work like a razor blade embedded in a Band-Aid. You know, a Band-Aid with a razor blade in it, if you had a cut on your wrist and I gave you a Band-Aid with a razor blade in it, and you put the Band-Aid on, your cut would be healed for a moment. Like the blood would stop flowing for a moment. You know, there you go. It's like, it works. You covered it. You gave it, you made it safe. It's all good. And then sooner or later, the blood would start oozing out the side of the Band-Aid. And if you didn't know to look at the Band-Aid for a razor blade, you would think your cut got worse while you put the Band-Aid on. And the only thing you could do at that point that would make any sense was go get a bigger Band-Aid and cover the cut. That's a growing cut, and be happy with yourself for catching the cut early. You caught the cut early, right? So now you knew that Band-Aids were going to be your helping friend, and you're so glad you cut it when your cut was small. And what you don't realize is that the Band-Aid itself is actually increasing the actual condition. Yeah, this is really very big time and reliably. Now, sometimes it doesn't appear to increase the actual condition. It just creates another condition. So when it creates another condition, now you're getting on a different kind of Band-Aid with a different kind of razor blade embedded in it. And the cascade has started. So look, there's a real important disclaimer. I'm sure you have a really beautiful following. You're a great host, by the way. I love these questions. And the thing I really want to say to your listeners is there's a group of people out there who are really thrilled with the diagnosis that they have. And they love their therapist, and they love their treatment plan, and they love their medication, and they couldn't live without it. It saved their lives. It's exactly what they want. They wouldn't trade it for the world. Right? Well, those people should keep doing what they're doing. And I really mean that. I'm not here to argue with those people that they should stop doing what they're doing. If they're like thrilled and they wouldn't trade this life for any life ever, like this is the best it's going to get. If you reach that point anywhere in life on any particular subtopic that you have going on in your world, please stay doing that, because that's a rare find. We don't all get to places where I wouldn't trade this for the whole world. And if you found yourself there, that's great. And you should be
happy.
Yeah, you should. I'm more power to you. But I'm not speaking to that group directly today. I'm speaking to the hundreds of millions of people who aren't in that group. And there are literally hundreds of millions of people who aren't in that group, who are pretty sure that they're untreated, undertreated, overtreated, undiagnosed, overdiagnosed, misdiagnosed, etc. And that it's different than what they hope for. And they're disappointed or feeling like they're not getting the life that they wish they could have. These people, I'm saying there are better ways to deal with mental discomfort than coming through the conventional psychiatric or mental health system. which is built to actually create a perpetuating patient base. Now, how do I know that? If it actually creates the need, a drug that actually creates the need for the drug by increasing the symptoms it's marketed to treat, is a fantastic business model. And it is likely to create billions of dollars, maybe even per day, in a profit margin. Well, it turns out that's exactly what's happening. There's billions of dollars a day in profit margin in these pharmacies and in the industries, and people line up outside the door just wishing, hoping, praying that they can get their medicine early and for a lower price, and so that they can take it, so that so that somehow maybe they'll feel better. That does cause you to feel better for a brief time, and then it increases the symptoms. It's a booming industry. It's fantastic. I wish you and I would have designed it. Living in the hills.
But we if we did, we'd be hurting millions and millions of people, like with the opioid sensation that happened. One of the things that I always say is, I've never met a normal person I like. If they're a little bit crazy, then those are my people, right? Because it really, and you said we all, even the monks in Tibet, have had thoughts that are not the norm, if you will. And even for them to become a monk, that's already crazy as it is, right? Because we don't understand that lifestyle. So sometimes not understanding, I think, ourselves is where we get into trouble. And I think that it truly happened with COVID. And you saw the spike in mental health in a negative way go up because people had to be with themselves. They couldn't socialize. They couldn't be the social animal that some were. Speakers all over the world couldn't go out on stages. People could not communicate with someone else. Divorce became very rampant, and then people even hurting themselves. And then it became also where people truly started turning to drugs, where it was either self-medicated or they went to the doctor, they had anxiety. I had one client of mine who, even till today, doesn't leave his house. This was a young man who was vibrant, he was outgoing, he was everything, and he felt the whole world closing in on him. And he went through several different doctors, and they all kept messing around with the medication. And all I kept saying to him is, I said, you have to relax, you have to breathe, you have to be you and just believe that you're amazing. Don't forget everything you've learned in your life. And he's still going through this, and he's still trying to get different medications and different doctors and different beliefs. And I said, sometimes maybe you just got to do natural stuff. But that's not what my doctor wants me to do. My doctor wants me to go on this prescription and test this drug and do that drug and do this. So what are your thoughts on what happened to not only this country, but worldwide with the mental health epidemic, if you will, that it wasn't just COVID, it became bigger than COVID because of the way people were either treated or became secluded?
Well, it's a little bit of a loaded, difficult question to take on.
Yes, I'm aware.
Did COVID cause mental health problems, or did mental health problems cause COVID? And we start looking at the impact of both of these epidemics and which pandemic is actually ongoingly more damaging. And of the two, it's very clear to me that the mental health epidemic is much more damaging and much more pandemic and ongoing than any kind of virus that ever did or didn't show up in time. So,
agreed.
If we use COVID as if it's something that happened and then people reacted to it, we're actually missing the point. So the construct that, COVID's there, and then we had a bunch of people react by contracting who they were as humans and reaching out for medicine, or beginning to drink, or beginning to be violent, or watching too much porn, or being connected to the internet, or whatever we did as a reaction to the COVID phenomena. We're kind of missing what's really there. So the mental health epidemic preceded the COVID epidemic by, I don't know, decades, probably since I've been in the field. And it's been growing as probably the number one killer. Although it's not called a killer, it's not even listed as a killer. It does kill all of our vitality. It does kill all of our aliveness. Once we get that explanation that there's something wrong with us, we walk around with something like, that wasn't me, that was my fill in the blank with a diagnosis. That was my ADHD. That was my bipolar disorder. That was my narcissistic personality. I'm on the autistic spectrum. I got PTSD. I got generalized anxiety. I got, schizophrenia, whatever people say they have. And they disown themselves. They actually pretend to be someone that they're not in order to protect the person that they are. So these people, once you get confirmation that there's something wrong with you, and you walk around with that prevailing conversation in your mind, you could say you died at that point. You could say the livelihood of that person actually dies. And it's not like dying is the failure of life. Dying is just a phenomena. It's just something that we're all going to face. And everyone before us who has died has done it pretty successfully. So we're probably going to be okay even when we die. Ultimately, everyone else has found a way to do it. And so, but we're so terrified of death. And that's really what, a lot what COVID was. As soon as they amped up that it was a deadly virus, that's when people got really nutty about what that really meant, and how afraid they should be, and how much they should protect themselves, how vaccinated they should get, how masks they should wear, how far they should be from all other humans. What should they do, how to talk, what to say, what not to say, share your ideas, don't share your ideas, break up with your family, break up with your best friends because you disagree about this and that. And the damage that got done from that particular domino is extraordinary. But that particular domino wasn't the first domino of the domino run. And correct. I would say, what we really have here is we have a mass psychosis that preceded all this, meaning a different sense of what reality is. Psychosis is a funny word because it assumes that we have an understanding of what reality is and that we're no longer doing that. But none of us have a very good understanding of what reality is. Even those people who are pretty sure that they think they know what reality is, they're probably the most dangerous of everybody. When you know that you know something, that's when it becomes really, really a challenge. So I hope I'm not, sidestepping your question. I'm just saying that, yes, my business increased with people seeking psychiatric assistance at what they thought was as a result of the COVID phenomena. But I could also make a pretty strong case that the COVID phenomena in its own self was created by the mental health crisis that preceded it, and it's been going on for decades.
It sure has. Well, Nikki Gangemi says that years ago, she was given medication for anxiety. She took it and she could not function.
Yeah.
So her doctor told her it takes 2 weeks to acclimate.
Yeah.
But she followed her gut and threw away the pills. And then she found mindfulness.
Yeah, exactly.
And she's been good ever since. So no negative side effects either when you find mindfulness. Nikki, thank you for sharing that, because that is exactly what Dr. Fred and I are talking about, is that I've never taken any medication. Even when I've had surgeries, they give me painkillers and all this stuff. And I'm like, you know what? If I feel the pain, that means I'm alive. I'm good. I'd rather feel the pain than, like you said, put a Band-Aid on it, because the Band-Aid does not take care of anything. It actually, and you said it beautifully, it just adds to another problem. It doesn't take care of the real problem, which is, why are you thinking this way? What is it about the anxiety? How come you're feeling anxious? Let's go into what's really going on, so we don't get into the heart of the problem. And I think that's has happened, and you know this firsthand, to so many people, and why your practice shot up with clients, right? That's why everybody in the mental health world, their businesses went up, The bad ones probably went out of business. The good ones stayed in business. But do we have to rely on medication to become better? And what I love what you said is that when you first initially took your clients off, it was the ones that were with the less
Low risk.
medication, low risk, right? Thank you. And that made a lot of sense because the ones that, if somebody has schizophrenia, and they're on medication, taking them off entirely off, is that going to fix it? I don't know. So that's a question for you. If somebody is on a medication for something that critical, how do we even deal with something without medication?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's another really great question, of course. And the thing that's really interesting about being on medicine or being diagnosed with schizophrenia is even schizophrenia is a questionable diagnosis, a very questionable diagnosis. And I have to tell you that if you want to experience schizophrenia, just start taking the meds that they have.
Mm.
You will
No,
then
thank
get
you.
all the symptoms. Yeah, of
No,
course.
thank you.
And no doctors do it either.
Mm.
They're prescribing medicine that they wouldn't take on a bet. There's
Mm.
no circumstances that they would take the medicines that they're prescribing. And it's because inherently they know that it actually causes the symptom it's marketed to treat. So somebody who has schizophrenia pre-diagnosis, like pre-medication, is very, very rare.
Mm.
So they come in and they say the wrong thing to the wrong people. Now, we might call it intuition, or we might call it, we might call our voices like a guide or the spirit or an angel or God. But if you walk into an emergency room and you say you're hearing voices, you will be diagnosed with schizophrenia. I don't care who you are.
Mm.
And once you get that schizophrenia, they feel compelled and will medicate you and diagnose you and drop that into your chart, which you will carry around with you for the rest of your life without anybody having the guts or the wherewithal to ever take off that diagnosis.
Mm.
And in the meantime, start taking medicine for this thing that you called voices rather than intuition or angels or guides or God or those things, we all have it.
Right.
We all have those voices. How do I know that? Okay, let's say turn off your voice. Turn off your voice.
It's not possible.
That voice that's telling you that, what voice? I don't have a voice.
Uh-huh.
It said turn off the voice. He doesn't know. I don't have voices. My sister has voices, but I don't. That's a voice.
Yeah.
And if you walk in and say the wrong thing to the wrong people, if you go to a barbershop enough times, you get a haircut. You go to a police, if you're on the border and you're talking about, please don't look in my glove box for marijuana, they're going to look in your glove box. It's the same thing. If you walk into an emergency room and say that you're feeling paranoid, and, sometimes paranoia is just correct. Like, are people watching you? Are people concerned about you? Are you being surveyed? Is surveillance around?
Oh, yeah.
Hello? Do you really think you're not being monitored? Or do you really think that there's no reason that paranoia is not real? Do you really think that they don't know every single thing about you, including the last thing you bought on Amazon at any given time and where in your house you are at any minute? Like, look, you could write me off as being crazy just for saying that until you really look at the reality. Like, it's not that hard anymore to just imagine that, let alone understand and just accept that that's what's happening.
It is.
It doesn't make you mentally ill to think that way.
No, for example, the other day, my fiance is sitting next to me, and I said a couple of words to her, and then later on, she goes on her Facebook. She goes, "What? I didn't even put this in my,
Yeah.
but here it is. It's showing up on my feed. I've never spoke. You told me those words." I go, "Yes, because your phone is listening to you."
Yeah,
She's like, "This is nuts." I said, "Yeah, well, that's technology." And before this technology was around, it was harder, but now it's super simple to be a little paranoid, right? Can we talk about a subject that has really touched so many of us, and it touched me when my next door neighbor many years ago, their 10-year-old kid hung himself
Yeah.
on his. It just pains me even to think
Yeah.
about it.
Mm-hmm.
On his bunk bed,
Mm-hmm.
he was 10 years old, put a belt on the top one, and he hung himself. 10 years old. What is the mental community, in your opinion, doing to help people fight this idea of I'm not worth anything anymore, I might as well end my life? And it doesn't matter if it's terrible when it's a young person, but I've also known people in their later years. I've known people personally, and because one, his wife was cheating on him, another one because someone didn't love him who he thought that they should love him, and they only thought of him as a friend. It's so painful to see people when they think there is no other resort but to end it all.
Mhm. Yeah, another delicate question. I appreciate it very much. And, we don't really know what their last thoughts were. I've
Mhm.
never interviewed somebody who has actually committed suicide,
Right.
and it's not possible. So we don't really
Right.
know what the final thoughts were. We interject that afterwards, that it's because X, Y, or Z, this or that. They felt unworthy. They felt
Mhm.
depressed. They felt rejected, or felt dismissed, or felt unloved. And we just assume that. Why do we assume that? Because we have the same experience when it happens to us.
Mm.
We consider the possibility that life isn't worth living. So we think that's obviously what happened to them, as if they're
Mhm.
different than us.
Right.
But they're not different than us. That's how
Not at all.
we assume that we know what they had because we have had it.
Mm.
That is the only place that we could draw from, is our own experience, because none of us have ever interviewed somebody who successfully committed suicide. We have no idea what their last words were. We have no idea what their last thoughts were. We have no idea. No one has ever accurately, spoken to. Some people, I get it. Some people would say that they say have, they met it in other realms. Okay, I give you that, but that's not what we're talking about here. So we assume this stuff because we also have passed through those gates. To pretend for a moment that you have never had the experience that life might not be worth living is not being honest at all.
Mm. Mhm.
Of course you have.
Well, I've recently met a few people who actually failed at suicide.
I understand that.
One guy shot himself. He lived. Another guy tried hanging himself, and he thought it was it, and the thing broke.
Yeah.
And then he's like, "Oh my gosh, what was I
Yeah.
thinking? What was I doing?" So you're right. We don't know, and it was by luck that they're still around,
Or not.
or not. Depends on how you look at it.
Yeah.
But
This is
so
a hard world. This is a
it's a very
extremely
hard
hard
world.
world to deal with. And if it starts looking better, to consider being over there instead of over here, I can't blame anybody.
Mhm.
The future is bleak. You can put on a pair. Like, do you want me to come up with 100 things to be terrified about in about 3 minutes? I could do it.
Oof.
Do you want to come up with 100 things to be really afraid of, or to be really depressed about in the next 3 minutes? Let's do it. How
Yeah.
about being really nervous about 100 things? I could totally do it. How about places where you feel awkward or out of place? Can I do that?
Mhm.
About
Mhm.
100 times.
Oh, yeah.
So the idea that it's normal to be able to set aside those experiences, and such that you live life in a happy state, a joyous state, a pleasurable
Mhm.
state, a hopeful state, an optimistic state, like as if those things show better mental health, is at least questionable. So there's some compassion, acceptance, and forgiveness that I have for people who reach the point of being suicidal. It's
Mm.
like, I get it. Here's what people want more than anything: human connection, period. I've traveled around the world. I've done psychiatry in 7 different countries as a
Mhm.
telepsychiatrist, in Bhutan and Nepal and Thailand, Israel, France, Italy, and England. I've been all over this country. And for the last year, since I'd say since 2006, probably, but maybe that's been when I've been more assertive. I've been really looking at, why do people come to mental health workers? What do they think we have for them? What do you really think we're gonna provide for you? And what they
Mhm.
want more than anything, as we talked about earlier, and is what your video shows, and what your event is about, is people want human connection.
That's right.
And so if you can catch somebody at that place, where you can hear and be with and honor the pain that they have, that's where healing takes place, right at that very moment. Why do we feel terrible when somebody commits suicide? That's another really important question to ask. What do you think the super duper tragedy is of suicide? Why do you think that there was something wrong with them when they did it? These are prevailing conversations. It's not like I'm arguing with those facts. I've dealt with, thousands, if not tens of thousands of people who have been suicidal acutely and or have recently tried and we'll say were unsuccessful or uncompleted, because it's never really success, so they've changed that word to completed or incomplete. And that's one of the ways to get yourself into one of these psych hospitals. Like, in fact, it's sort of like the way. The gold standard way to get into a hospital is to say you're suicidal. So if you walk into an emergency room now and you say life isn't worth living, you will be hospitalized. And you will be hospitalized and dropped with a diagnosis and given jolts of medications, which might, in fact, make you suicidal. Like, there you go. The industry actually perpetuates itself. So what people want when they say, I can't live anymore, I don't want to wake up, I don't want to walk out, I don't want to be with my wife, I don't want to be with my life in any way, and I want to commit suicide. The onerous, if not the courageous, and certainly the healing act that is being called for at that point is to connect. That person still might commit suicide, by the way. You don't get to prevent that. But I don't have a more potent medication at these crisis times than actually connecting with another human being. I'm not the first person to say that. I'm not the only psychiatrist to say that. There's been many sages and wise mental health workers over the years. Carl Rogers comes to mind, Irving Yalom comes to mind. The humanists, really, even Sigmund Freud, at the heart of it, that's what he saw as well. Certainly Jung saw that as well. All of our forefathers in the world, forefathers and foreparents in the world of mental health, all knew that human connection was critical, but to treat it as the healing resource, I think not people are doing that anymore. Instead, people are assuming that, they come to a therapist who generally sort of agrees that your life is very troubling and you're right to be troubled. And that's how therapy works. And more often than not, almost like AI there, and I don't mean to diminish the power of therapy. I think in a good therapist's hand, very good work can be done. And in psychiatry, again, what you see, everyone punted up to a psychiatrist because so-called talk therapy, didn't work. And now we're going to get the big boomer in there and he'll diagnose you and medicate you and hopefully make you better, but at least take the responsibility off my hands. And he'll choose his medication based on the buzzwords that he hears. If you say racing thoughts or impending doom or panic attacks or whatever you say, they're trained. We are trained to respond with a particular diagnosis. We only need a buzzword. You think we're using 9 criteria to make diagnoses? No, we're not. No, we're not. We're hearing buzzwords and we're calling you that. You call me impending doom, I know what to give you. You call me racing thoughts, I know what to give you. You call me can't finish your task on time, I know what to give you. You're awkward in a social environment, I know what to give you. And then I give you that, and it causes exactly that which you thought you were being treated for. And now your symptoms have gotten worse, and you get to be happy that you caught it early after all, and happy that you're finally being treated for something that's there. That's, it's a twisted system that, creates a pretty nice business model ultimately.
Oh my gosh. So I teach martial arts also, and I teach it to kids and adults and so forth. I have a young girl, no names, of course. Her mother came to me and she said, I don't know what's going on with my daughter. I said, well, tell me more. And she said, she has her own phone. And the other day I was checking her phone, and one of the calls that she made was to the suicide hotline. And I said, she did that? She goes, yeah, but she never told me she did that. I said, wow. I said, that is incredible. First, that she took action on her own behalf. I think that was powerful on her. And she didn't want to talk about it when her mom brought it up, but she was okay to go see somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Thank God they have not put her on any medication. If anything, I took it to my responsibility to always talk to her, to say how she's doing, what's going on in school. And lately, she's been more talkative.
Mm-hmm.
So the communication has been helping her. I also I did a communication workshop for leaders, and I had her be part of it. Even though she didn't express much, at the end she said she really, really enjoyed it. It helped her understand communication better. What happens to her now is that you can see that now she's more vibrant. She's talking to other kids. So she's coming out of her shell and she's seeing how she makes a difference by opening up a little bit. Now, I asked her mom not too long ago, I said, so tell me, how is she doing now? She goes, oh my God, she is happy. She's looking to do things. She's planning things. She's doing all these things. But in the back of my mind is exactly what you said. Even when somebody gets help, it doesn't stop them from eventually doing that last act. And one of the things that you also said that we may not always agree because there may be shame and guilt behind it is that every one of us may have had a suicidal moment where we say, why am I even here? Does my life matter? Right. And I think that goes for everyone that I've ever come across, even though they may not say so. But when we say, oh, I'm not good enough, you're kind of putting those words in there. So, what are your thoughts about positive affirmations for yourself
Mm-hmm.
to make yourself feel that you're worthy and that your day is going to be a great one?
Yeah, so I have the Moss method, and the Moss method is 20 different items, 10 different practices or exercises that are available. You've already mentioned a few of them, so that's pretty cool. And the first one on the 20 is something called gratitude. And so, in the world of gratitude, what I have people do and what I do each and every morning, including this morning, is I put my hand on my heart and come up with 10 things that I'm grateful for in the world. And it takes me, again, a few seconds to come up with 10. And most mornings, I could come up with hundreds more than 10.
Mhm.
So it isn't just that. It's a matter of really putting on the lens. It's an evolved state of being to get that my world is created by how I see it, rather than the description of the nasty world that's out there that I'm disconnected with. But when I start really putting on the glasses or the filter that life is full of grateful um, things that I can be grateful for, and I can even be grateful for miserable things. I can be grateful for things that are intolerable. I can be grateful for events that are going on that I wouldn't have be in my world if I had something to say about it. I can be grateful for the whole potpourri and the whole smorgasbord of what life has to offer. So in the Moss method, we take gratitude as number one. Number two is stepping outside and getting grounded. And number three is another one that you stated, which is meditation and mindfulness. So at 7 o'clock, this right over the top of what we've done here, I have something. I lead a meditation at 7 a.m. And that's why I asked you if we could switch, but you told me that it was a live show and we can't. So I totally
Thank you.
understood that. But someone else led my 7 a.m. meditation today because I do that every single day. And it's super important. It's a sense of I don't have to become my emotions. I can have them. I can have my feelings. I can have my thoughts. I can have my physical sensations, and I don't have to become them. And I don't know a faster, more efficient or effective route than mindfulness and meditation to get us there. And in that meditation, we have affirmations that we say. I come up with 3 of them every day. I go, find them, scraping around and get some affirmations. And then each of us at the meditation actually say those affirmations. I see the value of that in being very strong by setting up the launch pad, setting up the starting block so that we do get a life that's at least has a slightly better chance of turning out the way that we want it to, and freeing us from believing all the disempowering impulses that are there in the world to just jam on us. I mean, if you want to be disempowered, you just do nothing and you'll be disempowered, and momentarily they'll come and get you. It'll come and get you. And The world is geared up at this point to drop disempowerment into our lap. And so the default is to be disempowered. And if you want to be empowered, you actually have to do something. And one of the things you have to do is, find that centered self, find that authentic person, find the one that's being covered over with the mud, and get in touch with that person through maybe gratitude or affirmation or meditation, among other things that are all listed in the Moss method. And Welcome to Humanity is my big brand, of course. And Welcome to Humanity is a response that you can give to people for almost anything. It's rare that you could say something that a possible response that I could have for you wouldn't be Welcome to Humanity.
I love it. And what I'm doing right now is I'm going to put that up here so people can go take a look at it, right? They can go to welcometohumanity.net. And thank you for sharing your expertise with us today. When we consider mental health, we should, and I love the gratitude, because every morning I say my prayers and then I go right into gratitude. And but sometimes it's in the middle of the day. Sometimes it's in the afternoon. I'm driving. I'm just grateful for the tiny little things. And when I meet a new person, I'm grateful for their presence. So everything, if we can have gratitude in our whole day, I think that gives us a little bit more purpose and how we even communicate, right? And the way we treat another human being. I think that's part of the communication is this the vehicle that we use to transcribe us onto them.
Exactly.
I want to thank you for today. This was really incredible.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. It was a great conversation. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Do me a favor. We're going to say goodbye to everybody, but hang on for a minute and then we'll have a quick chat. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. If you watch this on the replay, hit hashtag, let us know your thoughts, and definitely follow Dr. Fred at 360.net, right?
drfred360.com, drfred360.com, and welcome to humanity.net. And I also hang out on LinkedIn and Facebook, and there's other places to be. You're welcome,
Perfect.
Nikki. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thank you, Nikki. I appreciate you. Everybody, have yourself an exceptional rest of your day. Take care.